We're in a season in October. What day is today? The 16th. So every Wednesday in October, I'm going to be sharing about inner healing. That's kind of the theme that I felt like the Lord wanted us to go after, especially in bringing in Pat and Jim as they kind of launched really us into it. And I've shared about the freedom tools, and I've shared about a variety of different models in here. But really, I was asking the Lord tonight specifically, like how do we really walk this thing out, inner healing, right? Because it's a constant journey. It's about maturity. It's about, Jay and I were talking, it's about true discipleship is really growing and becoming the best version of us and who we are. And recognizing the need for inner healing and for heart work. A lot of times people think, oh, I'm good. I've been in church long enough. I know the word. I can pray. I've got Holy Spirit. I'm good, right? One of the things I've loved in this Kingdom entrepreneurship group that I'm in is that business people are recognizing their businesses are not functioning well or not improving, or they're not able to accelerate in their businesses because of heart issues, right? Like, it's just true. Nothing is going to work in your life, including business and other everyday kinds of things, if your heart's not in a good place. But we tend to just kind of go along and we accept things kind of the way that they are. Well, that's just the way they are. Well, that's just the way they are. And that's just the way I am, so just deal with it, right? But inner healing, when we talk about inner healing, I don't want you guys to get the mindset that it has to be someone who's so broken and wounded that they need therapy. Do you know what I mean? Like, yes, people who have heavy trauma, who've been through difficulty, we've all had those seasons. Some of you might be in them right now. But we all have those dry seasons, those desert seasons, or those tough squeezing places. I call them those places of transition that are really uncomfortable, like a pregnant woman who's out to hear, like, get this baby out of me. Like, it's difficult, right? We all go through those times and seasons, but I want to make sure that we don't think that this is for somebody else and not for me, though, too. We don't need to have that mindset because this is a continual work. And so I want to give you guys some different tools each time we meet together, and I'm going to pull from some resources, too, because I don't want to be like your source of resource, right? Like, I don't want to be the only person like, well, let's go talk to Cindy. I really love several different models and several different ministries and several different books. And so if you ever need a book or something to do or to listen to, I'll always have a podcast or a book or a resource for you to check out if you're interested, and especially if there's an area in particular that you're wanting. But I wanted to share tonight on a couple of things. The first is what I just said, that I want to make sure that we understand inner healing is for everybody. It's not just for those that we think are like super wounded, have a victim, orphan-hearted thing. Like, we need to understand that. But I think we need to really embrace the fact that we're always in that place. Like, if we can equip ourselves to know how to take these tools and to use them, and ultimately it's about hearing the Lord better and deeper, but it's also about vulnerability, because you can't get healed up all by yourself. Like, I absolutely believe that God intentionally made it so that you will have greater breakthrough and inner healing when you're doing it with somebody else. That's just how it works. It's about family. It's about relationship. We have to be able to know how to have vulnerability and trust. And so the way that God made us, and I've talked about this before, so some of you guys have heard this before, but the way that God made our brains to work is absolutely amazing. And I don't know if you've studied a lot of neuroscience, but my favorite thing to share about neuroscience, and I've said it multiple times in here, and that is that ultimately our brain is going to require two things. We have to have joy, and we have to have rest. We will not function well, we will not operate well, we will not have good fruit if we are not able to be in joy and be at rest. If we're not able to have these two things, that is, to me, the definition of mental unhealth, right? Mental illness is the inability to be able to return to joy in a negative situation. It doesn't mean that the negative situation is gone and solved, but it means, how do you cope when a negative situation is present? How do you return to joy? Okay, so that is a huge piece of a lot of people's work, but especially the Life Model. This is a really great resource if you don't have it. It's called The Essentials of Christian Living from the Life Model, Living from the Heart Jesus Gave You. And there's several writers and authors in here, James Friesen, James Wilder in particular. Those are two really big names, Mary Beth Poole and some others. But they're licensed psychologists, pastoral counselors, therapists who are in the church house and be able to recognize there are some key pieces in terms of healing that I want to share with you. That lots of these different inner healing models use a lot of these same things. People just kind of put together their own little toolbox, if you will, right? But the key is for us to remember, and I think if I say these things to you, you're going to be like, oh yeah, I know that, right? Like, because this is what every Christian does. We're like, of course we need the presence of God. Of course we need to know our identity. Of course we need to spend that quiet time in the Word. Of course we know these things, but we don't always do them. And we don't do them consistently. And we don't always do them alone, and we don't always do them in family, in a real place of raw, open intimacy. When I have one-on-one inner healing sessions, and oftentimes it really should be 2 inner healing people with one, but I'm a therapist, so I don't have a prayer partner in the session with me usually. But they're one-on-one are usually 2 to 1, where one person is doing the inner healing, one person is receiving the inner healing, and the third person is the intercessor, right, just to pray and to cover. It also is good in terms of safety reasons and accountability and stuff when we talk about inner healing teams and growing a team here. But generally speaking, when you're the person giving the inner healing, it's going to be really important that your heart is in a good place too, right, no matter what. So like I said, whether you're on the receiving end or the giving end, this is all going to be really important information. But to go back to the brain, when our brains are developed, I like to talk with my hands. So I want you to see, this is your brain, right? And so this is your brain stem up here through my wrist. And the back of my hand here is this back part of your head, right? And so the front part where my fingertips are is your forehead, okay? And this little thumb part's in the shape of a banana. It's very similar to your amygdala inside your brain. Now, your amygdala, as well as your thalamus and some other parts of your brain, control emotion and regulate emotion on some level in your brain, okay? Now, the right part of your brain generally is processing creativity, emotion. When you think of feelings, music, it's the abstract part of you, that creative side of you is in the right side of your brain. The left side of your brain is the computer. It's the information, it's the data, it's the numbers, it's math, it's science, right? It's that kind of thing. I always talk about when I say dog, the right side of your brain is going, yay, puppy, soft, and we get excited about maybe a dog that we love. But the left side's like, it's hairy, sheds a lot, has 4, legs and a tail, whatever. Like, it's going to be describing the information. Generally speaking, those are the 2 sides of your brain. Now, the prefrontal orbital cortex is this front part at your forehead right here. This is what we call your joy center. When you're in joy or in peace, rest, this is what's active in your brain, is this part right here. When you're in fear, panic, when you're in survival mode, hopelessness, you're back here in the back part of your brain, okay? So if I were to draw a picture and portion out our brain, there's level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5, okay? So when we talk about trauma, we tend to go immediately, the brain goes and activates in level 3, usually, unless you have trauma at level 2 and level 1, particularly in your younger years, developmentally, right, if you've had lots of abuse or trauma A or B, under the age of 12 particularly, you're going to have a little bit more kind of a baseline, if you will, back in level 1 or 2. So this is when people get super upset and they have a hard time verbalizing, right? And you got to kind of wait to calm down enough before you can verbalize even sometimes. It's because sometimes you're in this lower part of your brain. Now, sometimes it's also because you're mercy wired. So if you're mercy wired and you understand the redemptive gifts, that's a little different. Your motivation is heart and compassion. Sometimes as feelers, it's harder for them to be able to gain access to the words until they can calm down enough to do that. So I plug that in there for my mercies in here. So, but generally speaking, that's what's happening, okay? We will react in at least level 3 or below. When we are having emotion, but we're able to be calm enough to deal with it, we're here in 4 or 5, okay? This is the information side, there's the emotional reaction. So both of these together, this is our joy center. Whether I'm upset or happy, if I can handle it, I'm here. Because why? Because this is my joy center. I'm rooted and grounded. I'm anchored. I have good, healthy attachment. I can have my emotions, but I can be fully present and aware to know how to solve a problem. Does that make sense? Okay. Otherwise, if my emotion overwhelms me to the point that I flip my lid. Anybody do that? And you get so mad, you're like you just snap. Like you know when you've done it too. It's like it builds and you're like, all right. You almost even do your hand. I don't know if you do that, but I've done that, right? Or your voice gets like, oh, as soon as you get to that place, you have flipped your lid. You are now in the right side of your brain. You no longer have access to the left side of your brain, which is where all the really good information is at. So any skills that you know, any strategies from therapy, any of the programs that you may have read goes out the window. You're now offline. Okay, so that's where you're going to likely be in level 3 or below until you come down off Emotion Mountain and can calm down enough to reaccess this part and this part of your brain, because that's where we come back to joy. Okay, so it doesn't mean, hey, happy and I'm wonderful joy. It means I know how to have rest also, remember? So peace and joy is required. The kingdom of heaven is righteousness, peace, and joy in the Holy Spirit. Isn't that interesting? So our brain, healthy brain functioning in terms of mental health, means we're in this place where we can be calm enough to think through something and actually still have emotion. What we tend to do is we tend to shut down the emotion, right? I don't have time for that. We're just going to shove emotion in the back, and we got to function. We got stuff we got to do. We got to take care of it. We're still breeding emotion, but we're not really dealing with it in a healthy way. Sometimes we kind of just shut it off. Or people go the opposite and they can't function at all. Function takes a backseat and it's emotional roller coaster until my drama moment is over. Anybody relating? Okay, I see heads nodding like, ooh, yeah, I remember those. Okay, so the thing is it's human nature. It's our human nature. God is an emotional God. Did you know that, right? Like he is an emotionally expressive God. He is love itself, right? So I want you guys to remember that because he's very intentional about how he created us. And our brains know that I need connection with people. You will not be healthy if you isolate and live in a man cave on a mountain in Montana all by yourself. Those people are not very mentally healthy because there are no community around them. Now, if they at least have a dog and an elk and maybe a couple of other things they can bond to, it will help. I don't know, like Wilson, on what was the movie? One of Chris's favorite movies, Castaway. Yeah, Tom Hanks and Wilson, the volleyball. Okay. We will go crazy if we don't have someone to talk with and to communicate with and to empathize with. If you watch that movie, it's actually really mentally powerful and emotionally powerful when you think about what he had to do to survive all that. That's what your brain's going to do, even if it feels and sounds crazy. That's what you'll do. That's why when people put people in prison and they put them away in solitary confinement for multiple days, they literally go insane. It is torment and torture to be completely isolated because we were not made for isolation. We were made to be in community. We were made to be relational, and we will not thrive without it. When you watch little babies, you pick them up. They've done lots and lots of studies of the mama looking at the eyeballs of the baby, and the baby looks up, and when it starts to grin, right, and it's not gas, right, but they start to grin at you, it's because they have locked eyes on you. That's the first thing that babies see. When they look for a face, they look for the eyes. They lock in on the eyeballs. Why? Because there's a download taking place. Literally, their right side of their brain, which controls the left side of my body, right? So technically my left eye and your left eye, in like a tenth of a second, has a download and says, do you like me or not? Am I safe or not? Right? Am I loved? Do I belong or not? Can I connect or not? In a split second, we're getting downloads right away. That's why we tend to read people's faces when we first meet somebody. We kind of get impression, right? We get the nonverbal cues. It's so important in communication. 80% or more is nonverbal. It's not what you say, but it's how you say something, right? So that's because our eyes are really looking for and needing that bonding and needing that connection. We need to be able to do that. And so it's interesting now. I always share this because modern day moms are looking at their phone while they're nursing their babies. instead of looking at their babies. So there's attachment issues and things that are now on the rise because of some of that. So just putting it out there for you guys to know that. So I think it's really important that when we talk about inner healing, we recognize that relationship and community. When we talk about family, it's really important. That's why life groups and the DBS groups that we're doing, Bible studies, anything that you can do to get plugged into church family, you guys being here tonight, it's not just because of education and what you're going to learn. Ultimately, it's really about the fellowship of the body. It's really about the connection of family. And when you can actually not just be present and doing something, like it's great when our home group goes and we rotate out with some other people at the Salvation Army, and we feed, a dinner once every other month or so. And it's good just for us to all kind of get together and stuff too, but it's good because we're loving on people. But just doing that, just doing an act of service, not just feeding, but we're making eye contact with them, right? Just that alone breeds fellowship, breeds community, breeds belonging. It actually brings healing when you're doing that. It's not just the actual food or whatever, or the gift that's being given. It's the connection. It's the sitting down at the table and hugging on a kid and they come by. And it's those little moments. It doesn't have to take a lot to really make an impact. Notice even when you're people watching at the mall or shopping or hanging out at Target or whatever, right? Like when you're walking around with people, I don't know about you, but the airport is the most interesting place for me to watch people anytime I go on the airplane, and especially on the airplane, because people just it's interesting. People who just they just want to sit here and they don't really want to talk to anybody, and they don't, they're just in line, and, it's really funny to watch because we're actually very social creatures. And how interesting it is that everybody's got their earbuds in and we're all looking on the thing, and we're not actually communicating with each other. So it's funny when I start talking to somebody or I see other people talking that don't really know each other. It's one thing if you're in your little travel, huddle. But when you're in line waiting, like Southwest, and we're like, hey, is this your number? That's not your, what number are we, when you're trying to find your little spot or whatever, and just chit-chatting with people, how much the anxiety or tension lowers almost immediately if you guys pay attention to that. The minute you break the ice a little bit, you can tell if that person has a wall and is like, I really don't want to talk to you. I really want to read this book. Or they're like, oh, yeah, let's chat. Let's talk. There's maybe a little bit of a wall because I don't know you, right? But it's friendliness. It's when we're able to start to make conversation and connection. Hey, so where are you flying? So are you here? Are you doing business or pleasure? Where's your last stop? It's just fun to just kind of chat with people. It's just nice, right? It's just nice. And I think we're missing some of that in our culture and our community now. We need to be able to get back to that where actually loving people means just talking to them. Just making eye contact and saying, hey, I care, just by chit-chatting. And you can kind of read people and tell if they don't really want to talk or if they're really going to do a lot of talking because, it's just fun. It's just totally great because it gives you a total open door to love on them and to prophesy over them and to pray for them or whatever and stuff too. I think that's really, really important, but it's healthy for us. So that's all an aspect of inner healing for us to understand. Just building relationship and being intentional in how you build bonds with people is really important, because a lot of times we don't always have healthy attachment. If we've had trauma or if we've had different issues going on in our life growing up, if we didn't have a healthy family or a dysfunctional system growing up, we're looking for healthy attachments and healthy people to bond to. We're always on some level looking for a mother figure and a father figure in our life. We're looking for friends, we're looking for mentors, and we're looking for people that we can help and serve, I hope. That's the level of maturity that we want to get to, where we're feeding from somebody and we're feeding somebody else. Does that make sense? And so we want to really make sure that when we're talking about inner healing, I want to make sure that you guys understand this concept, because with some of the most broken people that you would say they need to go get counseling or maybe some medication, right? Those that are really, really wounded, they still need people and family and community and relationship. And even in the church, those tend to be the ones that the church people will sometimes bring a little wall and say, well, we'll let Cindy or pastor or somebody else handle that one. Okay? And I say that in love, not necessarily calling anybody out or any situation here, but the church at large needs to be able to be that nurturing place. Now, I think historically the church has been that nurturing place, but hasn't most recently. Like, we ought to be able to be the place that people come to for not just mercy and service, but family, relationship. We say it all the time. It's a challenge because I say it. Hey, if we're kingdom, we're family. We're supposed to be family here. But can I be real with you? And I know I'm preaching to the choir because all of you guys are like you're here on a Wednesday night when nobody else is, right? And stuff. But it can be really frustrating in church leadership when only, 10% of the people are doing all the work. And I never really wanted to work necessarily in the church. It wasn't like even my goal. Do you understand what I'm saying? But it's one of those things that I know the Lord has called me into for a reason. And part of it, I think, is my frustration with the church, is because it's like, hey, we need to fix some things. We need to heal some things up. We need to kind of mature and grow up. And it's time for us to really step into some of whatever that looks like. And a lot of times we think it has to come with a title or position, but it doesn't. What it really is, I say position meaning like official, but like the position of your heart. When we had the new members join on Sunday, if you guys were here, the word that the Lord gave me, that he really has kind of been building for years now, but I really felt it. Like I felt this as an invitation or like a reminder of, hey, when you step in, this isn't just like day one, I'm tiptoeing in, I'm the new member. Like, no, like you're now family. And everything that you did before comes with you. Like all of your gifts, all of your ministries, all of your talents, all your resources. Like once you're in and you get a key to the house, like take ownership of it. Like you have ownership here. You have commitment here. You have resources that we need as a family. You know, we need people to help in children's ministry. And I love doing this. And I'm going to do this one day again on a Sunday. I haven't done it in a while. But everybody wants to impact the generations. And everyone wants to, save the world and make a great impact and influence on people. And I'm like, great, go sign up to work in the nursery. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, go help out with the children's ministry or the youth whenever they've got to go on a field trip or something. Do you know what I mean? Because that's the next generation. That's the next generation right there. And so we think of it like, oh, well, I meant like over here in this other way. But there's something about, when we're talking about inner healing, it's a maturing process, right? It's not just about someone did me wrong and I need to forgive them. I think we all know that one, right? Like, I'm scanning the room and you guys are all pretty mature. So I'm saying this for people maybe who'll be watching too. But forgiveness is like step one, no brainer. If there is anybody that you have not forgiven, you need to deal with that. You just need to deal with it. I work with a lot of different people in my office, and some people really struggle with forgiveness and bitterness, and especially if they were church people who should, quote unquote, know better, especially if they were in leadership, which I get. I totally get it. Why? Because it's another father or mother wound. It's another person of authority, someone who is supposed to know better, who is supposed to help take care of me, who is supposed to nourish or love me in some capacity, right? And we put expectations in that way. So I understand it. But there's this place where we have to humble ourselves and get with somebody to pray with us and say, I just can't get rid of this thing. And I need to know how to walk this out. So go hire a life coach or go do something so that you're intentional about making sure that the enemy has nothing in me. That's what Jesus said when they came to arrest him in the garden. He has nothing in me. Like, I don't want the enemy to have anything in me, right? And if there is, I'm thankful. Anybody ever have a button get pushed? Anybody ever say that? Like, get pushing my buttons. If you have a button that got pushed, you have a button. Congratulations, right? Like, so what is that button? What's it about? Where did it first come from? Pause and ask the Lord. It may not be about the present situation. I have done enough inner healing sessions when I ask this question and I say, Lord, when is the first time they believed that lie? Or when is the first time, fear of rejection showed up? Or when was the first time that particular kind of pain or fear showed up? Just trace it down the line, right? It didn't have to be the exact first time, but I can't tell you how many times there's a memory. Oh, I remember that day when. And they may even judge it. Well, it seems kind of silly, but, I got in trouble at school. The teacher shamed me in front of the class. I'm like, dude, that's no joke when you're 9 years old. That's like your whole world. And the person who's supposed to take care of you shames you in front of the whole class. Do you know what I mean? Now, it may not feel like the thing that happened at work that day, but the lie that's rooted in there got planted a long, long time ago, or the fear, whatever it was, got rooted a long time ago. And we don't recognize sometimes that that's where it started. So then here comes all this emotion, if you let it, and then we don't quickly just go, oh yeah, okay, I got it. No, like let your heart feel, go back into that place in the classroom. Remember what it felt like. Let the pain come up. Let the fear come up, or the shame, whatever it is. Now, Jesus, where are you here in this place? This is the Presenting Jesus tool in the Freedom Toolbook. Jesus, where were you here? Because he was always there. So we can always bring Jesus into that place, right? And then, what's the lie and what's the truth? So you walk through renouncing the lie, rejecting it, agreeing with the truth, ask Jesus to do something different. Right? Just let them sit with Jesus. Jesus will do something, take them out of the classroom or do something else. This particular scene, someone actually said Jesus hugged them and just held onto them really tight, and it was beautiful. But then you come forward through the timeline. Are there any other times where this lie had an impact? Because it's not just the first time, because here's what the enemy does. He plants it there, and then it's connected to the next time it shows up. And it goes a little bit deeper the next time. Then the next time that, let's say, fear of rejection shows up, or shame, right? Then there's another time and another time and another time. Because what does he want to do? He wants to water and feed that seed of lie so that it will grow into this plant in the garden of your heart that doesn't belong. And I always say dandelions are not flowers. So we got to go pull those things out. And they're not always easy to pull out when they're really, really big. You got to dig a little bit deeper in order to get the whole thing out. And so this is just an exercise for you guys to recognize this is what we need to do. But that's why relationship is so important, because we have to be safe enough as people and healthy enough as people that we actually are interested in what's going on in your life, that I would ask you, or that you would feel safe enough to share with me. Hey, I'm struggling in this area. Okay, let me pray for you. And while I'm praying for you, God, is there another time where something like this happened? Was there another? Just identify the fruit. Fear, shame, guilt, right? Rejection. When you start identifying the fruit, Father, is there another time that this happened, was an assignment of the enemy against this person? Can you just show them right now if there was another memory of that, right? And then we just go there and we deal with it. Jesus, what do you say about that? It's really quick and it's really easy. It's just a couple minutes sometimes to just do that and to unlock it. But because you were there to be safe enough, to be connected, to make that eye contact, that you opened up or they opened up in order to build that kind of communion and relationship is so powerfully healing. Because like I said, even if that emotion, once we calm down, when we're able to be here and our emotion is able to be expressed because we're in a safe place, and I can have tears come, and I can know that you're not judging me, that you're not looking at me funny, but that I'm safe with you, then my defenses can come down, the wall can come down, the guardian, if you will, can step aside, and that emotion part of my heart can come forward and get that nurture that I needed. Does that make sense? It's powerful, just your presence, just your ability to be able to hold space for somebody and to be able to show compassion. So I wanted to share that with you before I jumped into some of this. I'm not going to read you the book, but I'm just going to highlight a couple of portions that I think were really key pieces in this book. And you guys have heard me talk about them before on occasion, because lots of different models talk about these. But we were talking about love bonds versus fear bonds. Love bonds, again, is healthy attachment, right? Those little babies, they get held, they get bonded with, okay? But fear bonds can also be created. And I do believe that that is the number one weapon of the enemy, is fear and shame, those two things, because perfect love casts out all fear. In this book, it's on page 28, there's a little chart. I'm just going to read through some of these to you. The difference between a love bond and fear bonds, okay? So a love bond is based on love and characterized by truth, closeness, intimacy, joy, peace, perseverance, and authentic giving. A bond is desire-driven. It means I bond because I want to be with you. And that equals joy in my brain, according to science. I'm with somebody who likes to be with me, and I don't have to earn it. Love bonds grow stronger both when we move closer and when we move farther away. If I have healthy attachment, if I'm close to you, my bond is really good. If I leave for a couple of days for vacation, I'm still close to you. I think of you. I still love you. I might miss you. Do you hear what I'm saying? But there's still a love bond there. We can share both positive and negative feelings if there's a love bond between us. The bond is strengthened by truthful sharing. Participants on both ends of the bond will benefit. The bond encourages all to act like themselves, where you can truly be you. No masks, no faking. Truth pervades the relationship. We're real, we're authentic, we're genuine, honest. Love bonds continually grow and mature people, equipping them to find their hearts. And love bonds operate from the front of the brain, the joy center, and they govern, how do I act like myself? That's what we're doing when we're living with me here. How do I act like myself and be my true me? No matter what's happening. Now, if we have a fear bond, you and I, they're based on fear and characterized by pain, humiliation, desperation, shame, guilt, fear of rejection, abandonment, or a detrimental consequence. Bond is avoidance driven. I bond because I want to avoid negative feelings or pain. Fear bonds only grow stronger by moving closer or by moving farther away. The closer we get, the scarier it gets. So I have to avoid the closeness, okay? Or the farther away we get, the scarier it gets, so I have to manipulate closeness. Does that make sense? We cannot share, if I have a fear bond, we cannot share both positive and negative feelings. The bond is strengthened by either one, avoiding negative or positive feelings, or two, by seeking only negative feelings or seeking only positive feelings, one or the other. Participants on only one end of the bond actually gains the advantage, usually in a fear bond, because the bond actually inhibits people from acting like themselves. Deceit and pretending are required in a fear bond. My mask is on. Fear bonds increasingly restrict and stunt growth, keeping people from finding their hearts. And fear bonds operate from the back of the brain and govern how do I get what I want? This is survival mode. When we talk about the orphaned heart, we're back here. When we talk about sonship, daughtership, we're here because we're connected in joy and peace, right? And rest. Okay. Now, the next thing I wanted to share with you, one of my favorite parts of this book, actually, they have these little charts in here that talk about maturity. Do you know it's really hard to find a book that talks about maturity and growing people to be mature people. I'm just saying. There's not a lot out there because I'm in the middle of writing a book and I had to pause and go, I don't think anyone's going to buy a book on character development, so I had to rephrase what I was doing. I'm not even joking. I'm writing a book called From Suffering to Hope because I think people will buy that book. I don't think people will buy a book that says character development. Here's kingdom character. Here's how you grow your character in Christ. I don't think people will buy that one. Maybe that's just me. But, people don't really want to do that. But it's necessary. Okay, so this one, the life model actually has what they call maturity indicators. These are signs that you're maturing, okay? Or what happens when it becomes dysfunctional, like when it fails, right? And so I'm not going to go through all of the different stages, but just as an example, in the infant stage from birth to age 3, a personal task would be living in joy or developing trust, learning how to receive, beginning to organize themselves into a person through relationship, learns how to return to joy from a pleasant emotion. But then there are community or family tasks that need to happen, right, for maturing to take place. Parents delight in the infant's wonderful and unique existence. It gives care that matches the infant's needs without the infant needing to ask. It provides enough safety and companionship during difficulty so the infant can return to joy from any other emotion. But when that fails, if there's not healthy bonding, not community or good relationship, a weak identity develops. Fear and coldness dominate bonds with others. They have difficulty bonding, often leading to manipulative, self-centered, isolated, or discontented personality. They're withdrawn, disengaged, self-stimulating, unresponsive, have uncontrollable emotional outbursts, excessive worry and depression, avoids, escapes, gets stuck in emotion. That's just birth through 3. Child stage, age 4 through 12. Asks personal tasks. This is what they need to do. They can ask for what's needed, and they can say what they think or feel. They learn what brings personal satisfaction. They develop enough persistence to do hard things. They know themselves and take responsibility and make themselves understandable to others. The community and the family for ages 4 through 12 need to teach and allow a child to appropriately articulate their needs, helps child evaluate consequences for their behaviors, challenges and encourages a child to do difficult tasks the child does not feel like doing, like chores, clean your room, eat your veggies, guides in discovering the unique characteristics of the child's heart, and educates the child about family history, as well as the history of the family of God. But when that fails, a child the child will experience continual frustration and disappointment because their needs are not met. Sometimes they're passive aggressive, is obsessed with or addicted to food, drugs, sex, money, power, desperate to chase or find satisfaction. They experience failure. They fill their life with unproductive activities despite their God-given gifts, fails to develop a true identity, conforms to outside influences, feels disconnected from history and unable to protect themselves from lies and dysfunctions that are passed on. Adult stage, age 13 until you have your first child, or childbearing age. Some personal tasks: caring for yourself and others simultaneously in mutually satisfying relationships. Remains stable in difficult situations, knows how to return self and others to joy. Bonding with peers, developing a group identity. Taking responsibility for how personal actions affect others, including protecting others from self. Contributes to the community, articulates who we are, belonging. Expresses characteristics of their heart in a deep personal style. The community or family needs to do this: providing the opportunity to participate in group life, affirming the young adult will make it even though it's difficult during times of difficulty, provides a positive environment where peers can bond, teaches their behaviors actually impact others and impact history also, provides opportunities to be involved in important community tasks, and holds the person accountable while still accepting and affirming who they truly are. When this fails, a person can become self-centered, leaves other people dissatisfied and frustrated, conforms to peer pressure, participates in negative, destructive group activities, is a loner, isolating, shows excessive self-importance, can become controlling, harmful, blaming, does not become a life-giving contributor, but is a drain, is driven to play roles, wearing masks, to prove themselves to the world, get results, or seek approval from others. And from that stage, it says birth of first child until the youngest child has become an adult. It's interesting how they label them that way and don't actually give like ages, right? Why I think that is because they're showing you if you're having to caretake somebody else and the age that that person is that you're caretaking. Does that make sense? Your ability to be able to do that in maturity. So here's just a few more, just to go through it. Protects personal tasks, protects, serves, enjoys your family, devoted to taking care of children without expecting to be taken care of by the children in return. Allows and provides spiritual parents and siblings for their children. Learns how to bring children through difficult times and return to joy. Prizes community members, enjoys the true self in each individual, They parent and mature the community, give life to those without a family through spiritual adoption. Community families and tasks that need to happen during this time. They give an opportunity for both parents to sacrificially contribute to their family. The community promotes parenting. The community encourages relationships between children and extended spiritual family members. The community supports parents by giving them encouragement, guidance, giving them breaks and opportunities to recharge. The community creates a structure to help the elders do their job, which allows people at every age and stage of maturity to interact properly with those in other stages. And they listen to the wisdom of maturity. They place a high value on being a spiritual family to those with no family. When this fails, family members are at risk, they're deprived, they feel worthless and unimportant. Children have to take care of parents, which is impossible and leads to child abuse or neglect, or parentified children, which actually blocks their maturity. Children are vulnerable to peer pressure, cults, misfortune, are less likely to succeed in life's goals. Parents get overwhelmed without extended family support. They become hopeless, depressed, disintegrating, meaningless, loss of direction. Life-giving interactions diminish, along with life-giving interdependence, stunting the community's growth. Fragile, at-risk people fail to heal and survive. When the family-less are not individually taken care of, poverty, violence, crisis, crime, and mental disorders increase. We talk about being a church that wants to reach the city. Can we see culture and where we're at a maturity level? If you think about it, we're all a bunch of toddlers out there. I'm not even joking. like seriously, if we think about developmentally what we just read and talked about, most of the adults out there in the world are operating, and some of the shows on TV prove it, that everybody's operating in childhood still. So to understand trauma, there's trauma A and B. I always talk about A as the absence of the good stuff you needed growing up, and B is the bad stuff that happens to you. Here's some examples of trauma A. Not being cherished and celebrated by one's parents simply by virtue of one's existence. Not having the experience of being a delight. Not having a parent take the time to understand who you are, encouraging you to share who you are, what you think, and what you feel. Not receiving large amounts of non-sexual physical nurturing, laps to sit on, arms to hold you, and a willingness to let you go when you've had enough. Not receiving age-appropriate limits and having those limits enforced in ways that do not call your value into question. Not being given adequate food, clothing, shelter, medical care. Not being taught how to do hard things, to problem solve and develop perseverance. Not given opportunities to develop personal resources and talents. That's trauma A. We actually need all of those things. So it's harmful if we don't get it. Trauma B, we tend to think about physical abuse, spanking. They can become emotional scars. Sexual abuse of any kind, verbal abuse, name calling is included in that. I always remind people that how you speak to a child often becomes their own inner voice. If you really think about that, that's a lot of power. Verbal abuse, name calling especially. Abandonment by a parent, torture or satanic ritual abuse, and witnessing someone else being abused would be trauma B. And then the last thing I wanted to share with you is I want you just to ask yourself the question, are you reaching your potential? How satisfied are you with your level of maturity? One of the ways to kind of gauge some of that is think about the last time you got a button pushed. On a scale of 0 to 10, and you do not have to say it out loud, but just in your own mind, on a scale from 0 to 10, how big did your emotion get? Did you flip your lid? Right? And if you were to think about that particular moment, I want you to actually think about one. If you were to think about that particular moment, can you identify the emotion? 1, 2, or 3 emotions might be mixed in there. Can you rate on that same scale of 0 to 10 how big that emotion was? For example, you can have like anger as an 8 on that scale, shame being like a 7 on that scale, fear being like a 3 on that scale. Do you see what I'm saying about the mixture of emotion in there? And then I'm going to ask you, what did you actually do to calm down? Some people, like I said, stuff the emotion, cut it off, shut it off, do something functional. A lot of people I know clean in those moments. They're like, we got to do dishes. We got to take care of some stuff, right? And you're scrubbing the dishes because you're really mad, but you're scrubbing that pan, right? Or gardening, something physical, going and running, exercising, doing some of that. That's not all bad. But just know you've got to identify, what am I feeling? Why am I feeling this way? And then what am I going to do about the actual issue? If doing that physically helps burn some of that off, that's fine. But are you processing it is my point. Are you just shedding it away and not dealing with it and just taking care of your task stuff? Because then you're just in that function mode. You're not really dealing with that other part of your heart, right? So pay attention to the actual emotions that are showing up. And then I want you to ask yourself, what lie was I believing when that button got pushed? Because that means there's a lie in there still, right? And if you were to have that big of a reaction, that's why we're thankful when the button gets pushed. Because then we know, oh, I've got a chink in my armor. I need to go and go, okay, Jesus, this may not have to do with the person who pushed the button, by the way. Because you're the one with the button. So it's your heart, and your heart is your responsibility. So, okay, I have the button. Regardless of them needing to change, I have the button. What did I feel? What did I believe about myself or about the situation? What was the lie, if I say it that way? What was the lie? And there may be 2 or 3 in there. So can I reject, renounce the lie, receive the truth? But don't stop there. Say, okay, Lord, was there another time in my life where I felt that? Whether it was the lie or the feeling, either one, when was the another time I felt that lie or felt that emotion in that way? And let him bring up a memory, and there may be another situation there that's in your subconscious that you didn't think about because it was in storage. It's in the storage unit back there. So that's how you want to be able to walk through some of that yourself. But I wanted to share with you guys those pieces, particularly about the trauma A, trauma B, and the maturation process, because we are all a work in process, right? And when we're doing inner healing, it doesn't have to look a certain way. It doesn't have to be, okay, we're going to schedule an hour or 2, and we're going to sit down, and we're going to go through the Freedom Tools model, the WeSud and the Fruit Loop and all that, which is all good stuff. But sometimes it's just, you're just doing life. You're doing life every single day with people, getting triggered in certain areas. We kind of know some of this stuff, like I know I need to forgive some people when stuff happens, but when it happens, what do? Especially if it's like people who are close to us, because those are the ones who push our buttons the most. But what do? Think about all the times, because I know there's probably more than one, where you had a button got pushed off and you became avoidant. You detached, right? I just won't do that. There are some people where you would just literally cut relationship and say, I'm not going to go to that church anymore. Well, then I'm just going to quit my job. Well, then I want you to recognize that that behavior is based on what we just shared in that book. It's about not being able to have attachment enough to handle whatever the situation is. I'm not saying you don't need to quit the job or leave a certain really bad place, but what I'm saying is check it, right? Check yourself and go, okay, if I can calm down me enough, I can see it from my point of view. Here's what maturity says. Can I see it from the other person's point of view? 2. Because if I can't and I just sever relationship, then I'll never grow. I will never be able to mature from that. It doesn't mean I stay in relationship, especially if they're not a healthy person. Do you understand what I'm saying? But I can make this clean, where I can still approach the person even if I know they were wrong. I can actually say, hey, here's the part I did wrong. Will you forgive me? That's called the ministry of reconciliation that we're all called to. But can I do that? Hey, can I humble myself? Because there's no shame here. Can I humble myself and say, you know what? I shouldn't have done whatever. Now, they might be super unhealthy and be like, well, no, you shouldn't have, and this is all your fault. And they might be that kind of person. And you don't have to take that part, right? But the scripture says, and I think it's in Matthew, where it says there, when you go to the altar to give an offering to the Lord, and you remember that someone else has something against you, it's not talking about you needing to forgive somebody at this point. It's talking about if somebody else has something against you, you're to leave your offering there, go and try to make this right, and then come back and give your offering to the Lord. Now, it doesn't mean that it will go right, because they may not ever forgive you or even want to say anything to you. But you did your part to try to clean up the mess. Does that make sense? That's maturity. That's maturing. That's growing character, right? So that's part of inner healing as well, is I'm going to own, what we talked about, that maturing process, I'm going to own my mistakes, and I'm going to clean up my messes. I'm going to be responsible for my action and not stay in a victim mindset or an orphan-hearted mindset back here and just sever relationship and then just keep on going to somebody else who likes me. But you actually grow in relationship if you can actually work this out and apologize and heal and forgive. Think about that. I don't know about you, but my closest friends are the ones that annoy the tar out of me sometimes, and we fight really well together. We don't fight ugly, right? We fight good, meaning we might disagree, but we still love each other. That's a love bond, by the way. Because I can work it out with them, they can work it out with me, and we can forgive each other, and we're actually stronger for it. Because we're able to respect each other enough to be able to say, okay, listen, this is what I did wrong. I'm sorry. Will you forgive me? Whether it's in your marriage or whether it's a friendship, a neighbor, whatever it is, coworker, whatever that situation is, you are responsible for your heart. You're responsible for the wholeness of your heart. So, are you clean before God about that? Is there anyone in your heart that you know of right now that has something against you? It's one thing for me to say, do you need to forgive somebody? I did that already at the beginning of our time together. But does anybody have anything against you that you're aware of? And what do you need to do to try to make it right? That doesn't mean you necessarily reconcile the relationship in terms of becoming best friends or whatever again. Does that make sense? And every relationship is different, so I have to qualify that, of course. But go before the Lord. Is there something I can do to clean that mess up and make it right? And then be able to come and be clean before the Lord and say, the enemy has nothing in me. He has no access point to me because all doors are closed. Does that make sense? Any questions about that before we move on? About anything that I've shared? Love bonds, fear bonds, walking people through some of this stuff? Okay. So it's one thing for us to go through it ourselves. It's another thing for us to walk other people through it as well. And you don't have to share a actual personal story if you don't want to, but I wanted to kind of use an example or something, if you guys don't mind, of a time or a situation where you were not necessarily like in an inner healing prayer ministry moment, right? But like something showed up, a person was wounded, broken, having a difficult time or whatever. You're in their life, you're on the phone or something. How many of you guys have been caught in that kind of position? Okay. Did you know what to do? Yeah. Okay. Well, the good news is you're all mature enough to go help Jesus, right? Just help Jesus. Just know that sometimes that's just that's really honestly the best thing to do is can we just pray and just ask the Lord to pray? I always tell people, it's hard because I am a therapist, but I have to tell people that sometimes hey, I'm not your therapist right now. I'm just Cindy talking, right? So they know that I'm not doing therapy at that moment. It's really important for you, though, to get permission. In that moment, you might think that you have permission to speak into their life or to pray with them about something. I want to encourage you to, it's kind of like, when we're teaching people how to pray for healing and you ask permission to touch them on their shoulder or their knee. It's the same thing before you pray into their heart of hearts. Ask permission. Hey, so, and they may be like, hey, can you pray with me? Yeah. Do I have permission to really pray over you and speak into your heart about things? Do I have permission to give you feedback on what I see? Because if you really want me to pray for you and want me to try to help in this situation, I'm just going to pray. I'm not being counselor. I'm not giving advice, right? I'm not coaching them. I'm talking about just prayer. I'm praying for you. Do I have your permission that I can pray and really go into some deep stuff here? Because I don't usually take it really lightly. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not just a simple thing. Like, okay, well, do I actually have your permission? Well, and they may look at you like, well, yeah, I came to you to pray for me. I'm just making sure. Why do I say that, though? Because for them to say it means they've just opened up their heart. The minute they have to say, yes, guardian just stepped aside on some level. That wall just kind of came down a little bit. Yeah. Now, for some people, it's interesting. If you look at their face, they'll go, yeah. Like, if it's one of those, you're like, are you sure? You know, because some people don't really, they want help, but they really don't want help. Does that make sense? And again, we're not talking about advice giving. We're not talking about telling them what to do. We're not literally being their mom and dad. Let me say it this way. Mothers and fathers of young children tell kids what to do. Mothers and fathers of older children don't bark orders. Anybody got teenagers? We don't bark orders to adult children. It's a different level of respect, right? Okay, it's a different kind of relationship. Spiritual mothers and fathers don't bark orders to people and tell them what to do. That is not mothering and fathering. Can you tell I'm getting on a soapbox here in just a second? Because this is what happens in leadership sometimes in the church that really bugs the tar out of me and has done a lot of damage, is when rulers place themselves in a place or a seat and are honored and respected as leadership and do lots of damage because they think they're supposed to be ruling instead of being a mother and father. And what do mother and fathers do? We come up under and we raise people up. That's true leadership. That's true mother and fathering. It's empowering people to step up into their greatness. It is not lording over and controlling and telling you what to do. That is not mothering and fathering. So when I am asked to pray into people in that way, especially if you're going to take that time to go in. I'm not talking about like the 2-minute prayer at the end of church service. I'm talking about like really sit with somebody as they're opening up their heart about stuff. If they're going to unload everything, I would even stop them in the middle of, before they start their story, when they kind of go on with their story. Hey, can we pause for just a second? I just want to know before you share all of this, I'm really thankful, but do I have permission? Or let them share their story, and then you'll be like, okay, so having said all that, do I now have permission to speak into your life as I pray for you? Does that make sense? Get permission. There's a spiritual dynamic to this because we're activating their will in it, right? And they're giving you permission. And it really, if I can say it this way, it's really kind of a holy thing, because you've now been giving influence over their heart and over their spirit. And so the other book that I didn't get to bring because I left it at the office is a book called Blessing Your Spirit by Arthur Burke and Sylvia Gunter. Is anyone familiar with that book? We know through Scripture, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob did it, right? The power of blessing, the mother and father's blessing. You saw if you were here with Pat and Jim when they demonstrated that with Chris and I, which was very beautiful. We loved that. It's important that we receive a mother's and father's blessing. It doesn't have to be our biological mother and father. But especially if we're carrying on that role as a mother and father, a spiritual or emotional mother and father to somebody, as we're doing that we recognize the power and influence that we can have on people emotionally and spiritually by creating that love bond that we talked about, right? So there's a level of responsibility, not to be afraid of that, but again, it's a place of honor. It's a place that we ought to be able to really honor and hold as a holy thing on some level. I actually believe that this is what sons and daughters are supposed to do. We're supposed to become mothers and fathers. This is how we extend the kingdom, is by really loving people, right? We say it all the time. Well, let's just love people. We're just going to go out and love people or whatever, like in outreaches, or we're just going to love one another. But how deep do we go? How deep do we really go? So I'm going to challenge you now So I'm going to ask that the 4 men that are here get together in a group. And I'm going to ask 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to ask 3 women and 3 women get into a group. And then I want you guys to be vulnerable and share a time when you flipped your lid. Okay? And I want the other 2 of you who's listening to this story, I want you guys to walk through. And it may not have to be like the one that you were just thinking of. It can be a different one. But I want you to get real. This is not a made-up story, Bill. No role-playing some little other person's life, okay? We're not no dramatizations. I want this to be really real, like a real assignment. No, it's not going to be recorded. You know, the microphone will be off you, so you can share privately. But I want you guys to get into groups so that you can open up and share, okay, here's a vulnerable moment. I flipped my lid. Here's where I lost control. And I want the others, have one of you decide, I mean, you can tag team if you want, you know, but have someone walk you through, Lord, can you just show us, like, do we know what the lie was? Don't minimize it. Well, it was just because don't do that. Just go, I felt angry. On a scale of 1 to 10, how bad was it? Right? Oh, it was 11. Right? Or whatever. Like I really lost it. Not super proud of myself about that. But, okay, any other emotions involved? On a scale of 1 to 10, what were they? There's a little bit of fear, pinch of shame. Okay, you got what I'm saying? All right, so can we trace it back? Do we understand the button? How big is the button? As you begin to pray with that person, ask the Lord to take them back. Is there another time? And does this feel familiar? Is there a common lie that needs to be renounced and broken off? And what's the truth on the outside of it that we want to receive? Does that make sense? So you're just going to do a mini inner healing prayer session just by walking each one of you guys through, again, real brief. You know, it doesn't have to be big, long, drawn-out story, and here's my whole life chapter about all this. Like, it's just, what was the moment that you got triggered? Can we identify the emotions? Scale it 1 to 10. How big was it? Kind of like how we do with physical pain when we're praying, right? And then what was the lie? Go ahead and do the repeat after me. Break that off. God, was there another time when this particular emotion or lie showed up? Is there another one? There may not be one that shows up, but if there is, walk through that. Is there anyone that needs to be forgiven? The lie that needs to be rejected? The truth that needs to be replaced? Does that make sense? And then you always close out with the blessing. So bless them, prophesy over them, or something, and then we move on to the next person. And that's what we're going to do for the rest of the night. Any questions? You can run now if you don't want to be in here. Okay, thanks, you guys. All right, so go ahead and get in your groups, and you guys can spread out if you want to that way too. Mm-hmm. Nessa? All right. It's a really great question. No, it's okay. It's a really great question. I think she went to the bathroom. But I'm going to address a couple things. One is, if you don't really remember, like you may not remember what triggered it behaviorally. Usually, you'll know the emotion. So what I would have you do is sit and remember the emotion and actually give yourself permission to feel the emotion. If you can let yourself feel the emotion, you might remember why or what happened, but the actual event doesn't matter as much as, but I remember the emotion. I remember what happened. Does that make sense? So just try to find something and go through the various emotions, meaning the button that got pushed does not have to be anger. I just use that as an example. It could be fear, panic. It could be loneliness. It could be shame. It could be guilt. It could be so just trace any emotion that you can remember that happened. Surely you felt something in the last week. We're not robots here, right? It doesn't have to be on like a 10, trauma scale, but just recognize what was triggered. when you flipped your lid. Remember, it's about flipping the lid. You lost control, even if it was for a little bit. It doesn't have to be like, major trauma, terror thing. Does that make sense? Okay.